So in this video I'll be showing you how to use some abalone and silver along with some Mokume Gane wire that I've made to make a ring like this. So if you don't know, abalone is actually a shell, like this. And the inside of it is all nice and rainbowy like that. Well, you can get it in a veneer where they basically shave it down and turn it into this really thin sheet that you can use for different things like this ring or different inlays. So we'll be using this and not this. As for the band wires, these are some Mokume Gane wire that I made. That basically it's copper, brass, and silver all twisted together and fused to give it this nice twisted and multicolored look, kind of like a Damascus look. And of course for the inner band we're going to be using some silver, and this is a 0.6 millimeter sheet of silver that we're gonna cut a piece off of. So to make the actual ring itself, you're gonna need a size, and a ring sizer is perfect for that. And this is a thick band ring sizer. And this is a lot more accurate when you're making thicker bands versus a thin band. So if you're going to be making bigger ones, get one of these because a 10 in this and a 10 in this fit completely different. So, like I was saying, a 10 is what we're looking for. And I'm just going to measure right here. And we'll get our diameter. So now we have to do some math. So when it comes to the math, I've had a lot of people actually have confusion with it, so let me break it down completely. So you're going to want the ring diameter, the inner diameter, which we measured on the mandrel, which was 19.75, and we're going to add the thickness of whatever metal you're using. So in my case it is 0.6 millimeters. Once you have those added together, you're going to multiply it by 3.14 or pi, and that will give you your total length in a flat sheet to make a ring that would fit that inner diameter. So I'm just going to take my silver and use an edge that is already completely straight and go in from another straight edge and mark the length. So you might notice I already have a line going this way. That was for the previous band, and the previous band was a very tall, I guess, or thick band. And I'm going to be going a little bit smaller than that. To do that, I'm just going to set this to about 8 millimeters. So I'll just take that and hook it in. So your guide line is right here, and it's already a straight line. And then I'm going to just pull it across, making sure to push this down to scratch into the metal. So there we go. So now I have my guidelines for cutting, which we'll be doing with the jeweler saw. If you're using a piece that's this big, you're going to want a bench bend that you're not going to run into on the top. So if it's one that's just wood or a flush, what are these things called? Anvil, then that's perfect. Because other ones have a little bit of a lip here that if you try to cut something on it, you're just going to hit it. Even if you flip this over, you're still going to hit. And then you can't make your cut. So yeah, just keep that in mind when you're using bigger pieces of metal. And then I'm just going to use a little bit of saw lubricant and a saw Make sure your saw blade is whatever is best for the material and thickness you're using. Okay. When cutting bands like this, you're going to want to cut on the outside part of the material you're keeping. So if it gets a little wavy and you cut out a little bit, that's fine because we're going to grind it down to make it straight. But if you go in, you have to grind all of it down. So there we go. We have our inner silver band, exactly the length that we need. You can actually buy strips that are already cut in 8mm or whatever millimeter you want, and then you can just cut one line and be done. But I buy sheets of metal so I have options whenever I need them. So I'm going to need to anneal this because this is spring hard, and that makes it really hard to bend into anything and keep its shape. So we're just going to heat it up. Make sure you have plenty of ventilation going on. I have this actually hooked up to a fan in the window, so there's a bunch of air being sucked through this. And you just want to get this up to a slightly glowing red-ish orange. Yeah, once you get it all heated up and everything like that, you're going to quench it and throw it into a pickling solution to clean off any of this, so we can start rounding it and then soldering it together. So as I was cleaning off, let me talk about this ring. I actually made most of the video on this one already, and I ran into so many problems that I had to scrap all of it. So this is the new video with all the knowledge that I've gotten from making this ring. So this is extremely brittle. You can't bend it very much, and getting it to go all the way around this, you kind of have to bend it at a decent angle, and it just snaps off or doesn't want to stick. So I've learned from making this one that you need to cut this into smaller pieces and kind of layer them into it. So we're going to be doing that, and it gives it a really nice look, I think at least. Okay, so now that it's all cleaned up, I need to make sure that both edges are completely flat. And since we cut it from a already cut flat piece of metal, I only need to do that to one side, which is this side. So I'm going to use one of these to do that real quick, and I barely have to take any material off. So now all we have to do is round this, and I like to use it on the flat back part of the mandrels to make sure everything is as uniform as possible. And once I have it like this, I take some pliers that have no teeth in them because you don't want to scratch all this up, and bend it down. Basically, you want to make this into a D. Kind of like that. And then I push them together and overlap them. And continue to overlap, so basically it'll stay like that. And then I will pull it back, and it'll be spring-loaded into one another. So now I don't have to worry about a gap being there. And all I do is push them down to line them up perfect. And we should be good to go. Make sure that this isn't off either, because you can get it all weird like that. and you don't want that. So make sure that's straight and everything's flat. Take this over to the soldering area and solder it. So I'm going to use a third hand and put it on top of this just so it's off of my table to hold this, and then I'm going to put some hard solder on the inside after I flux this and dry it out so it doesn't bounce around. And with bands like this, I use 2 pieces of hard solder normally to make sure that it flows all the way across. So when heating this, just make sure that your pieces don't jump around, and try to heat the whole piece as evenly as possible. And you'll know when your solder is about to flow, because your flux will pretty much disappear and turn to like a glassy looking texture, I guess. Yeah, see how you can't really see that anymore? It's all just glossy. There we go. And then I'll heat up the underside too to make sure it pulled all the way through. So there we go. My solder joint is completely sealed all the way across. There's no gaps. Don't drop it because everything's really hot. And I'm going to put this into the pickling solution to clean it up, and then we'll round it and continue. So I'm going to need to round this out now, and I'll do that by just putting it onto the mandrel and pushing down until it basically stops, and use a small rawhide mallet to shape it into where it needs to be. And I'm going to try to hit down here because that's going to be the biggest area, and then I'll flip it over. So there we go. And I wanted it to be right in the center of the 10 on both sides. So there we go. So now I need to clean up the outside a little bit to make sure it's as uniform as possible so I can put my outer bands on. So I'm going to put this onto a mandrel and use a file and just basically clean up everything on the outside. And I'm going to be using a old mandrel of mine that I don't mind being messed up. So as you can see, it took down these sides to be equal, and this is a little bit lower in the center, but that won't matter when we're gluing everything in. But the outsides need to be as clean as possible, because we're going to be soldering stuff to them. So I'm going to be using these as outer bands. So I'm just going to take the outside measurement and then use the same math as last time. And clean up the end like I've done on my other pieces. So now I'm going to anneal this piece and then round it and solder it together. This is square wire, and I'm just going to do the same thing as I've done with the band and wrap it around the flat edge of the mandrel. And then when it's in a weird little U shape, I'm going to turn it into a D shape and make sure everything lines up. So there we go. I'm going to throw this into the pickling solution to clean it all up, and then solder it with a piece of hard solder. Alright, to solder this one, instead of using the third arm or third hand, I'm going to use a different technique, which is just putting it onto a charcoal block, fluxing the area that you want to solder, and I'm going to take one piece of hard solder, move the solder joint on top of it, and there we go. So the heat will actually suck the solder up into the piece. Okay, so with that done, I also already made the other one and put it on to our center band. And as you can see, it's really on there. This isn't soldered yet either. This is just how tight the fit is. But we need this to look like that. So take the mandrel and put your outer band on here, and go ahead and push down a bit. It's going to start to warp on you, and try not to warp it too much. Take the rubber, or not the rubber mallet, the rawhide, and just kind of tap it and push down. And you're going to want to lightly tap these because you don't want them to stretch too much, because we want them as tight as possible. Basically, you just want it to be round, and then go ahead and take it off. Okay, now that it's round, but it's wavy, so we're going to use the anvil to make this flat. And again, just barely tap this, because if you tap too hard, you're going to stretch it, and it's not going to fit properly. Okay, so we're going to want to take the centerpiece and put it into this one. And like I said, it's going to be very tight, so you can use the mallet to tap it in place. There we go. And then what I'm going to do is make sure that there's a little bit of an edge sticking up from the inner band. So when we solder this, it'll have a clean edge all the way around, and then we'll grind down the sides. Okay, so let's get this ready for the last bit of soldering. Okay, so we're going to need to put some flux on it, and I'm only going to do one side at a time, just to make sure that everything goes together right. And then I'm going to do the inside of that same band too. So there we go. So I'm going to heat this so it dries up all this and doesn't make all the solder move around. And then I'll place all my solder bits. And I'm going to want to flood basically the top of this, so I'm going to place a lot of pieces of medium solder. Alright, there we go. So it's completely flooded in almost everything. And we'll cut that down so you won't see any type of gap between this. But we need to pickle this now. So I'm going to do the same exact thing on the other side. There we go. Both sides are soldered on. So I need to sand down the sides before we can do anything else to make sure that there's no gaps. Because if there's any gaps, I'm going to go back and put some solder in them and fill it in. So this is some 220 grit sandpaper, and I'm going to use a little bit of water and just do little circles. And make sure you do it on a hard, flat surface. So yeah, you can see little things in here that we want to get rid of. So there we go, it's all nice and flush. So now I need to do it to the other side. Okay, so this side has a couple gaps that I need to fill in, because if I cut it down any more than that, it's going to get really, really thin right here. So I'm going to do that. Okay, now that we have the ring to the point where we start putting stuff into it, we need to figure out a way of holding it. So there's two ways you can do this. One, you can use something like this tripod that has a hole in the center and a old mandrel. Make sure it's an old one, because you're going to get glue and you're going to cut this mandrel up. And you can use it this way and just turn it as you go. So this will work, and you can put something underneath it to catch anything that falls, or if the glue is dripping or whatever. Or if you happen to have a mini lathe or even a drill, you can do this with some of these ring mandrels from ringsupplies.com. And basically you can put the ring on here and then use an Allen key and tighten it up so it can hold it in place. You don't even need to really turn the lathe on, because you can turn the piece to work on it. So yeah, if you want one of these, and they come in all different sizes, 4 different size rings, you can head over to their website, which is ringsupplies.com, and use the code GoMeowCreations, and you'll get a little bit of a percentage off. I think it's like 15 or 10%, but still pretty good. And these things are really handy. I actually really like using them. Okay, so here's it basically on the mandrel, and on there as tight as I can get it. I'm going to clean up the inside of this a bit, because we need it to be clean, for one, so you don't see all this through it. And I need it to be roughed up a bit so that adhesive will stick to it as best as it can. And then I'm going to clean it off with some alcohol to make sure that it is completely clean of any oils. Okay, so now we need our abalone veneer, and you could probably do this with any other veneer that you can get your hands on. So I need it to fit in between here, but we need to cut little pieces of it and place them in there. So I'm going to be using some CA glue and some tweezers to do this. And if you really want to, put some gloves on so you don't get glue on your hands. Okay, so I have a little piece like that. And you can see that it's a little too big. So I need to cut a little bit of that down. So you can see it fits in there. It's very tight and it kind of snaps, but that's not a problem. So I'm going to take some CA glue, place it right there, and then use a toothpick to spread it around. And I can push this over that. And push it down. So basically you're just going to stack them and continue going until you reach the other side again. Okay, so now I have the whole thing covered. And now I need to fill in the rest of that with CA glue so it's flush with the top. And you don't want to put too much on at once because it will start to get all weird and it just won't dry. You can use an activator on this, but make sure you test it first on a larger amount so it doesn't turn white or mess up in any way, because if that happens, you just ruin this and you have to cut all this out. So as you can see, it's completely filled in with the CA glue now, and it's all lumpy. So you could use the lathe to cut this down like you would use the lathe. But to get these lumps off and to make sure everything's exactly how I want it, I'm going to use a flat file. And this can be done with the other setup too. So you could just keep going like that and make sure that the CA is the same level as your outer bands, and you'll know that because they'll start to grind down, so you want to go as straight as possible. But I'm going to actually use the lathe now. And make sure everything is 100% flush. So yeah, that's pretty much why I bought a lathe, is so I don't have to do that first part I showed you all by hand. And it looks like it needs to go a little bit deeper because there's a little bit of overlap here and here. And then we're going to have to go through and fix any little imperfections, if there are any, by filling them back in with CA glue and then cutting it again. So now I'm going to take a little bit of 220 grit sandpaper with some water on it and clean it up a little bit. So there's a little bit of a white spot right here, and not really too many anywhere else that are noticeable. So I'm going to take that out. So to fill it in, I'm just going to put more CA glue in right there. And then I'm going to use this, the accelerator, and just lightly mist over it from pretty far away. And then I wait for that to harden up. So there we go. Now I need to clean off the glue from the sides and the inside, and then we can start polishing this up and getting it to its actual finished state. So to get it to the point where I can polish it, I need to go through a bunch of different grits of the sanding pads that I have, and then do a final polish. When it comes to actually polishing with a polishing compound, I'm actually not using my finger guards, so I can feel the heat coming off of this, so I know when to back off, because if you put too much heat into this, you can actually burn the material, and I don't want that to happen. And after all that, here's the final product. So thank you for watching my video, and if you liked it, feel free to leave a thumbs up. If you have any questions or suggestions, leave a comment below. And if you would like to be updated every time I post a new video, subscribe to my channel. I try to put out a new video every week. Well, thank you for watching and see you guys next time. Bye!